Hi everyone, my name is Gary Gomes. I'm going to talk to you about Vedic astrology, how it fits in with the politics of the world, how it affects your lives, and also what locations I expect to see a lot happening over the coming week. So I do this with a combination of various Indian or Vedic astrology techniques, some common, some not so common. I try to explain them in a way which is understandable, uh, at least in part, to person who's not expert in this field. And some people may even have objections about the way I interpret, which is fine. They can point out my errors, and I'm always ready to take healthy criticism from you, and I want to do the best job possible for you as listeners. I've noticed my articulation has been falling off a bit over the past few weeks. I think it's mainly because I've been tired. I blame the Mars K2 conjunction because Mars is ruler of my house of speech. However, I have to work doubly hard when these things happen. So if you want to contact me for a reading or for lessons, please do so. There's no obligation involved. I can give you pricing and arrangements and what information I would need from you and what information I can provide to you. My phone number, which you can text me at, is 508 525 0001. Again, that's 508 525 0001. My email address is Gary Gomes G at gmail.com. I'm on WhatsApp, and you can look me up through the phone number, excuse me. Uh, and you can message me that way if you would like to. Uh, I'm also on Facebook in a variety of incarnations, but the first two methods are the most foolproof way to contact me. I have had some people send me messages to the Crystal Expectations store that my wife and I own, and sometimes those have gotten lost in the ether. So again, the 508 525 0001 is the most reliable. But so 508 525 0001. Okay. All right. So I'd like to talk about a few topics today. First of all, I'll talk about the week, and then I'll talk because I was asked to talk about it, and I received a couple of questions about cryptocurrency, uh, not in the message room, but also from a student and a person uh, and individuals I know personally. And also, I'll talk a little bit about uh, well-known astrologer brought up parallels between the Epstein case and the Watergate scandal. Uh, and I and while I think there may be some overlap in certain elements of those cases, uh, I'll explain why I don't think the Epstein case is going to blow up in quite the same way the Watergate did. Okay, so it's um, but and it's astrological, it's not political. So so let's go first of all to the chart for today. So you can see I have my cryptocurrency chart. That's not Superman's dog. That's for those of you who've seen the movie or even know about Superman, that's not it. Crypto doesn't have his own stash of money he's trying to foist off on the general public. All right. So most of you are familiar with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. There are new mediums of exchange or media of exchange um, being created throughout history. Um, its economic functions are relatively simple. I'm not saying that to be diminish the problem that people have with have understanding economics in general, but it's actually not a really if you get into the esoteric of it, yeah, it becomes as complicated as any other system, but economics is not. Um, Conceptually, at least, it's not a difficult concept to understand. When you get into trade balance or exchange rates, balance of trade, things like that, that's where it gets a little bit um, weird and difficult to understand. But right now, we're seeing a chart which has the first house as Libra. The Lord of the first house is in the eighth house. So we're talking about things like investments. We're talking about political cover-ups. Okay, so those are all eighth house matters. Okay, secret conspiracies. Okay, but the moon is exalted in this chart. Venus is with its friend, the moon is in a friendly sign. So this actually indicates a relatively optimistic look at these things. Um, the downside is that Saturn is aspecting the moon and Venus, so that's a little bit difficult. But there is another side to this particular um, conversation in that Saturn was called a Raj Yoga Karaka planet for Libra rising. So it's essentially a very good planet for Libra rising. Well placed by house. Okay, so Saturn's in the sixth house. Saturn does well in the sixth house, but it rules the fourth and fifth houses for um, this chart. So a lot of us are going to be worried about financial security, uh, also the future, because Aquarius is the house connected with the future because we have Rahu there. And we're worried that there are going to be struggles and even some problems with money because of Ketu and Mars as the ruler of the second house of income located in the 11th house. Okay, so Mars is a wealth producing planet for this particular rising sign. Um, it's in the same sign with Ketu, which is uh, essentially it robs things, it steals things. You know, it can bring like sudden influxes of wealth. I mean, so that's the positive side of K2. But it does tend to make people hesitant about taking chances, investing. Um, I would predict, first of all, that after Mars passes K2, we'll probably see a drop in interest rates. Okay, because that's been really the thing that's kind of gummed it up. And you'll see Mars pass K2 within a couple of days. Okay, end of the week at the latest. Depending on which node you use, whether or not you use, and let me see if I have the true node um, or the mean node. This the other day. Don't use for the Rahu and K2 aspects in the chart. Um, I think they exist. I think they don't mean, I don't think they make a difference. So yeah, I'm using the true nodes, which is what I prefer. If I were to use the mean nodes, you'll see the difference. So it'll take a little bit longer for Mars to pass over K2, but it's really kind of an insignificant amount of time uh, for that to happen, maybe about another week or so. Okay, so we're going to go back to the true node. And the difference between the true node and the mean node is essentially uh, the true node. I think it was introduced by Michael Erlewine. I'm not sure, but I think it was. And he introduced it because it made the timing of eclipses more accurate. The nodes are not material objects. They don't um, move backwards and forwards in the sky like, uh, or they don't appear to move backwards and forwards in the sky like the true planets do. And we also have right now a Mercury retrograde, which I neglected to uh, alert you of last week, for which I apologize. And Mercury retrograde essentially means that communications get followed up. One positive thing that I've seen noted by Western astrologers, and I've very rarely seen mentioned by Vedic astrologers, is that sometimes you'll find fantastic bargains or deals during Mercury retrograde. And I found that to be true. However, on the downside, things like deliveries, um, uh, starting new initiatives tend to cause problems for people. And most people have been experiencing this for the past month or so because of this Mercury retrograde. And Saturn's been preparing to move backwards for about the same amount of time, maybe a bit longer. So Saturn essentially causes additional problems. And we'll have a cluster of planets going retrograde in August, excuse me. So we'll talk about those next week. But uh, so so we came out of a period a few months ago where a lot of planets were retrograde and they all went direct. And I think that's why you're seeing I would call it a lot of panic or not necessarily panic, but concern about economic matters popping up right now. Uh, some people are very, very positive. Some people are very, very negative. Some people are concerned with currency or changes in currency. I think it was a news story I just saw. And let me just, all right. So, yeah. So essentially, this past week, we heard that the UK want to lower its voting age to 16. And they're not the only country in Europe to do this. I'm ambivalent politically about what this means. Um, but there are obviously political ramifications to this. They're not doing it because of, I don't think because of any altruistic moves, if I'm honest. I think they're doing it because young people tend to vote more favorably towards more liberal programs when they're younger. Austria has already done it. So again, England is not unique in this regard, but this is a kind of a Mercury retrograde and a Saturn retrograde kind of move because Saturn essentially um, mixes ages. It doesn't mean that it won't be a success, that it won't pass. Get these very um, strange or very unusual movements when you have retrograde planets. So, so they'll seem like very unorthodox, very unconventional, very non-traditional ideas. Um, and if we're talking about this, so let's get back to the chart though in general. So the government is depicted by the sun in this chart. The government is having some reconsiderations over things like immigration policy and even some other topics that it was drawing a hard line in the sand on over the past few months. Um, the Mars K2 conjunction, everybody's a little bit angry right now. That's going to go on for that K2 in Leo is not going to go away anytime soon. And as a matter of fact, you'll probably see more aggravation or more disruption against governments after August 15th because of the Sun and K2 coming into conjunction. Uh, see some overthrow of governments uh, across the world uh, during that particular time span between August 15th and September 15th, or some very strong attempts or resignations. The other thing is, from this chart, you'll also see, but there have been some reforms passed. There's a rescission bill in Congress right now, which is essentially taking money back from public education, not from public education, excuse me, from public broadcasting and from international aid, uh, U.S., and that's a change of position that hasn't really. Um, I think it's the first time I've seen a cut like that in 60 years. So again, this is pretty much in keeping with my theory that we're reversing a 60-year cycle of expanded government control. Now, again, this could all be an illusion. There could be more government control coming down the road, but basically this is a cutback or a pullback from government supporting institutions, no matter what they did. Um, and you have Jupiter in the ninth house in this chart. Generally not a favorable planet for Libra rising sign, but it does indicate new knowledge and new opportunities. And it aspects the first house, aspects uh, the third house of ambitions and goals. So it's kind of a mixed bag right now because we do have Mars aspecting Saturn. Mars will soon move into the same sign with Saturn, or the sign opposite Saturn by August 1st. Um, and I think you will see either a cut or some kind of a pullback in interest rates over the next couple of months. Uh, the other thing is, with that Moon Venus conjunction down there, this isn't necessarily a bad combination, but one thing uh, one thing that did strike me as being interesting was the restoration of aid to Ukraine and also the um, one, two, three, four, also, and that's the sun going going towards its own sign. Okay, so the sun's in Cancer, uh, and also it's a way to quote unquote force a peace, if that makes sense. So, so essentially, a lot of the stuff we're seeing right now seems superficially to be very, very non-traditional. That's Rahu and Aquarius. It seems to be a break from the past. Saturn in the retrograde seems to be a break from the past, although the retrograde Saturn seems to be moderating it just a bit. And the retrograde Mercury is also saying not quite so fast, but the retrograde Mercury will be over within about um, 3 weeks' time. And another 3 weeks after that, you'll start to see the old patterns reemerge. And in terms of economics, I don't think you're going to see huge shifts in the economy over the next couple of months. And the main reason I'm saying that is because Jupiter is still in this very favorable chart position in the United States map. Over the next week, though, you will see a lot more violence, especially connected with vehicles and also connected or aimed at government officials. This is not only true in the United States, this is true internationally. So a lot of us in the United States don't follow international news. Um, I do. I've always kind of followed international news. I can't say I keep up on it every day, but I've always been interested in what other countries are doing and how their domestic situation. Oh, okay, so that's the Mercury retrograde moment. I got a phone call and I had to take it. My apologies, folks. So again, it's these kind of like what I would call weird but not unanticipated movements that happen during Mercury retrograde. Um, and um, but I it it's been interesting in that with the Jupiter direct in particular, um, a lot of judicial decisions have been made which favor existing authority. And again, I'm making the supposition that that's mainly because Jupiter's in Arthur Nakshatra, which is kind of a relentless nakshatra, and also is heading towards this exaltation point, which is roughly around 4 degrees of Cancer. So I think whenever you see these planets doing these things, these are sort of they may be traditional, they may be what you don't want to happen, but they are what happens regardless. And I think one of the things that I've learned in years of doing astrology is that what you want to happen actually has nothing to do with what the stars reflect in the chart. So, but if you stick at something long enough, what you want to happen will happen. It may not happen exactly when you want it to, but it will happen. So again, that's the value of determination. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is, again, be very careful traveling over the next week or so. We're still in that danger zone between Mars and K2 over here. Mars is still aspecting Saturn. This is going to give a really bad weather cycle over the next week or so. And also a lot of accident-prone incidents happening. If we're talking about the general economy, generally, I think the economy will do okay over the next week, over the next few weeks, but there will be some reversals and some disappointments. One of the things I thought was really fascinating is you have so if you recall me saying that K2 can turn friends against you or can turn allies, people who have been allies against you and vice versa can turn enemies into friends. But one of the most interesting things I saw over the past week was um, Murdoch being sued by Donald Trump. So it's, but it's also important to realize that Rupert Murdoch no longer makes the policy decisions for the Wall Street Journal or for the entire media empire. It's gone to his sons. And so but again, that doesn't mean that um, there will be shifting political alliances. Elon Musk is talking about starting his own party. Um, Democratic centrists are talking about controlling the progressive wing of the party, things like that. So it's really, we're in sort of a period of what I would call factional battles in politics. And that'll also involve the financial markets because certain financial markets want things to stay the way they are. Other financial markets want some changes or some disruptions. So you'll see a lot of that over the next year and a half or so. Okay, but is it going to affect regular working people? Unless you're working for the government or unless you're working for media outlets, not necessarily. So again, a lot of the activities happening over here in the house that essentially of the U.S. chart is happening in the eighth house of the chart we're talking about right now. So you'll see some unusual alliances and some unusual changes of affiliations over the next couple of years. And I think it's going to be interesting. So I'm not going to make any long-term predictions about that until I get to a show where I make a long-term prediction. But I want to talk about that just for a second. So we'll talk about your individual charts in a few minutes. One thing that did come up during the week was I saw a post from a very eminent Western astrologer who shall remain nameless because I have a lot of respect for her. But there was a discussion about Epstein being similar to Watergate, and that there was a cover-up. Essentially there was supposed to be a cover-up. So, according to what I can see from this chart, um, I don't I don't know if there's been a cover or not. If I'm honest with you, I have a Nixon resigns chart. A lot of discussion. Excuse me. There was a great deal of discussion. I'm not sure why this is refreshing the database. I might just get out of here and pull up another chart. Let me close this chart. But this is not doing what I wanted to do. Okay, so let me close the window. Not letting me. I'll open up another. Spend a lot of time on this. This is the chart for when Nixon resigned. Okay, so in 1974. And so it was August 20th, 1974. I can recall I had just graduated from college, which lets you know how ancient I am. But there was a Saturn aspect on Mars in the chart. Um, Venus was in the 10th house. This doesn't actually match the exact time of day he resigned, obviously, but this gives you a good approximation of where the planets were in the sky when he resigned. Jupiter was in Aquarius. He was in Nixon's seventh house. So let's go to Nixon's chart. Let me just see if I can share this with you. My apologies, I'm probably not sharing it. Now, the key thing I want to focus on is Richard Nixon's chart versus Donald Trump's chart. So the individual charts make a big difference. Flip over to, I'm going to stop the share, make sure we're picking it up. Click here. So Richard Nixon has, and it was in 19, he was in a Mercury Mahadasha, which is typically a very unstable Mahadasha for virtually everybody. He assumed the presidency during a Saturn Mahadasha, which is very stable. It gives a lot of persistence. Okay. So let's go over to the date. But Mercury Mahadasha is extremely unstable. I'll tell you that from experience. He got lopped off in March 31st, 1974, in a Venus subgrade. Venus is in his house of open enemies. There was a Jupiter transit to that particular house on that particular day. Jupiter essentially is really, I was just trying to think of a good way to put it. Jupiter and Venus are not. Jupiter dislikes Venus. Venus is neutral towards Jupiter, but Jupiter dislikes Venus. So he's going to also, if I recall correctly, Rahu was in Nixon's fourth house, which can indicate some kind of a decline. And let's see. And Ketu was in his 10th house, which can indicate a fall from a position. Okay, so let's look at, uh, and again, one thing I like to push because it's essentially something I found to be very true for politicians is Nixon has that Mercury Mars conjunction in his fifth house of politics. So he was adept at lying, as most politicians are. They're adept at playing roles. Okay, that's a form of lying. It sounds a little bit judgmental on me, but it's not meant that way. You know, politicians are essentially um, a politician will never give you his or her honest opinion. Okay, that's something. So, all right. So Trump and Biden, we're gonna go to the now chart right now. Now, Jupiter is a friendly planet for this particular rising sign. He is in a Venus subperiod, but the Venus subperiod is in his 12th house. Venus in the 12th is not necessarily a bad placement. Okay. It's is one of the few planets that actually likes the 12th house. So this would actually protect Trump to a certain extent. The most dangerous period for Trump coming up over the next few years, and I think you will see a scandal erupt around September 14th of this year for Trump just because of Rahu being in conjunction with the sun, but it'll actually put him into a more in even a stronger position. But the Saturn period is dangerous between June 15th and November 18th. Now that coincides with the midterms. That doesn't mean that the Republican Party is going to lose the midterms, but it will be a time of personal um, problems for him. Okay, personal issues, maybe even health issues for him. Okay, so it'll probably damage the party just a little bit. But this doesn't, but his Jupiter Maharaja, he's in a Jupiter Venus subperiod. That's going to override the third level. Overall, he's in a pretty fortunate position all the way up until March of 2028. You know, at which point he may either resign uh, to for health reasons or for other reasons to allow Vance to take the position. That's my guess. That would be my estimate. If we have uh, other things going on in the chart, and again, the Jupiter position, none of these sub-periods is particularly great for his health, if I'm quite honest. Um, so let me just go over here. But this is a very different chart from Nixon's chart. Nixon has Nixon was really vulnerable to the nose. Trump isn't. You know, that's one of the unique things about his chart. He sort of like thrives on nodal energy. So that's why he won't, and that's why he won't give up. Nixon was a fighter as well. Maybe Trump will say, I don't want to go through a third impeachment, but given everything he's been through, I would think it would have to be a health problem that would not come out. Okay. Um, so Let me just go over here. Barring that, uh, sub-period, maybe it's just a late, just a bad lame duck presidency, but I don't see him voluntarily leaving the way Nixon did. So go on to the cryptocurrency chart. And I did get a question from somebody asking if the cryptocurrency bill um, was a way to replace cash um, with non-cash. That process has already sort of started. Um, and it hasn't started from cryptocurrency. It started from essentially from bank exchanges and almost everybody having to buy things online. And I I went in. I have a store and somebody paid used a payment service to buy a $3 item. It was so. I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's we're already being steered and conditioned in that direction. And for some people, it's safer. But cryptocurrency, I think cryptocurrency is going through a kind of a renaissance right now, a rebirth right now. And basically, what the bill that was recently passed, or what the bill is in the process of passing, is going to do is establish not necessarily an official cryptocurrency for the United States, but to get it recognized as something which can be validly traded and validly used as a currency. So so essentially that it's a mini step towards a cryptocurrency being accepted. Um, and when I said economics is simple, essentially, um, I'm going to say this and it's going to tick some people off, but gold has a value ascribed to it because it's rare, okay? But it's an entirely artificial value. And the reason I'm saying it's an artificial value is because um, rarity doesn't necessarily make something valuable. It's judged valuable because it's rare. The full faith, and we went to a floating currency system in the early 1970s, had the Bretton Woods, and we agreed that, so the dollar was the standard before Bretton Woods, and everything was fixed in terms of dollars, in terms of costs. And what happened at that time, talking back to the Nixon years, was Nixon said, well, we should let the currencies float in value against each other. So we've been living in what I would call a relativistic currency standard. And the United States goes into more and more debt. The value of U.S. currency diminishes, but we're also a long way away from what I would call a total monetary collapse because the United States essentially has never not paid on its debt. It's never missed a payment, and I think that even though people are afraid of that. Okay, so let's look at the cryptocurrency chart again. I'm going to stop the shares just to make sure that um, But I think the point I was trying to make, or I was making pretty poorly, was that it's essentially because we've been used to a relatively stable period with some with some economic uncertainty over the past 60 years, doesn't necessarily mean that we can't change currencies or change um, how we value things. That actually happens relatively frequently throughout history. The thing that always concerns me about crypto is I've seen a few things like this pop up over the past uh, 30, 40 years or so. And there was an infamous story about um, a few centuries ago, and this is going to sound hard to believe, but it's actually historically true. The price of tulip bulbs went through the roof um, in I think it was in either 16th or 17th century Netherlands. And it was because it was so prized as a crop and people wanted it. So there was this speculative boom on tulips, which sounds crazy to us now. Um, but I also saw the internet crash in the late 2000s, and crypto is an investment right now. It's it's used by some people as a currency. You can buy some things online for uh, through crypto, and I don't think that's bad. Um, but so essentially, what I'm trying to say is, long story short, we ascribe value to things we ascribe value to. Uh, there is not an objective measure connected with anything we ascribe value to. That being said, I think you're going to see a panic in the crypto market over the next year because of the Rahu transit of this particular house, and especially as we get more towards um, even more so around 2027 as Saturn gets weaker and Rahu goes into this second house of money. This is a chart I pulled up for cryptocurrency for January 3rd, 2009 in Tokyo, 6 a.m. in Tokyo. Um, I know other people have crypto charts, but this seems to describe pretty much what crypto does. It has this very unique, um, the moon is over here, moon and Venus. It's very attractive. It's but it's very unstable because of the Jupiter Rahu conjunction in the seventh house and Saturn being in the eighth house. That's a little bit problematic for me. So it's something I think is going to take a long time to stabilize. And it's in a Saturn Mahadasha right now. Cryptocurrency's in a Saturn Mahadasha right now. And and like I said, I think you're going to see a lot of investment in it over the next year and a half, but sudden crashes and falls, and maybe I won't say a collapse, but almost the crypto depression in 2027 to 2030. So again, I hope I'm wrong about that. I have no desire to see people, but I think the key to this market is you can make a lot of money if you move quickly. So if you're capable of moving fast, like that Mercury in the second house, if you're capable of in and out of markets quickly and maybe flipping it back and forth for more secure, more solid investments, yes, you can in fact make a lot of money from crypto. But I don't necessarily think it's regulated as a trading mechanism right now. I personally don't see it really solidifying, at least not until 2033. It may come out earlier, like around 2030. It may actually start to replace international currencies. But right now, for me, and I'm inherently conservative about these things, but just to let you know my bias. I'm very conservative about any kind of investments, and this is not investment advice. It looks very unstable and very speculative to me over the next 5 years, and it looks like it'll stabilize around 2030. Okay, so it's going to take a while, at least from what I can see. That doesn't mean the people will not have an opportunity to make financial gains. And if I'm looking at it right now, it's in the Jupiter subperiod. Around August 12th, we'll go through, I think we'll go through a bit of a decline. November 12th, it'll improve. And January 31st, um, there'll be unexpected shocks to the system. March through July, it'll probably increase in value. The Mars subperiod, I think you'll see a lot of shakeups in the system, some losses and some consolidations, all the way through August 20th of 2027. And after August 20th of 2027, it'll go through this, again, very disruptive reorganization cycle. And it'll start to stabilize around 2030. So that's my immediate take on it. But it's I'm just trying to think of a good way to put it. I don't think it's going to replace currency. Um, I don't think the markets are going to collapse. I'm going to talk about the 2029, 2030 chart probably next week because a lot of people are worried about that particular chart. But I don't see this as causing an economic collapse, nor do I see any country collapsing around that time. But it will be a fraught time, let's put it that way, a very um, uneasy time. So on that note, let's go back to this week. Actually, now chart, this will be a little bit different. No, not markedly different. So let's talk about, this is for you folks out there. I know I've had a lot of interruptions. I apologize for that. And so for Aries, we have overall good financial growth, but some restraint is in order because Saturn does give us some debts because of friends. Aries and Libra should watch out for friends or for friendships, okay? Uh, Mainly because both signs have indications that friends will not be loyal or will be a little bit jealous of them. Venus conjunction Moon is in its exalted sign um, right now, and it's in the same sign with Venus, so that's actually good for financial gains. Jupiter's in the third house gives more of a polite read on things, there won't be a lot of interest in taking chances or risks with Jupiter in the third house. Sun is in the fourth house. A lot of attention to life. Sun, Mercury conjunction, Mercury's retrograde. So some difficulty communicating. K2 and Mars are in the fifth house. That's not a bad combination. It does indicate some problems with children, though, or children misbehaving. That'll last for about a week, until around August 1st, or it was about 2 weeks until around August 1st. Um, And the rest of the chart is relatively stable. But again, just be careful if people offer you things that you really can't afford, or people who promise you things, and that they're not to be trusted. For Taurus, this is May 15th to June 15th. We have a Moon Venus conjunction in the first house. That's very good. It gives good financial growth. This combination can give good financial growth because of Jupiter in the second house. Sun and Mercury are in the third house, gives a sign some confidence, but definitely some domestic squabbles and squabbles with relationship partners. Rahu's in the 10th house. This is actually a good combination. If Rahu's in the 10th, it gives promotion or gain in career, but with very little improvement in life, unfortunately. So financial gains will be limited. They will be there, but they'll be limited for Taurus. Gemini is June 15th to July 15th. Jupiter's in the first house. Good potential for expansion of work, but not without some effort and not without some sacrifice, if I'm honest, with Jupiter in Ardra Nakshatra. Sun and Mercury are in the second house. This is a good placement for um, help from bosses or help from superiors. Uh, Mars and Ketu are in the third house, gives a certain amount of fearlessness to this particular sign. And I think overall, from this particular combination, it can give the ability to overcome enemies. Fifth house Lord is Mercury. Lord of the fifth is in the third. This is good for attaining what you want to obtain or obtaining growth and benefit. Sixth house Lord is Venus, placed in the 12th house. So that means elimination of debt or being able to spend your way out of debt. The yogi point is in the seventh house, so relationship partners will probably have, or business partners will probably have good income growth. So that's a good sign. Or and the Moon Venus aspecting it pretty good for financial improvement. Rahu's in the ninth house, so bosses will be difficult to satisfy or make happy. Saturn's in the 10th. Again, as we said before, good for financial growth, but a lot of hard work connected with this combination. So Gemini actually has a relatively good week, but in terms of romantic involvements or relationships, not quite so good. And also relationships with children, not quite so good. There'll be some separation or difficulty with both relationship partners and children, and that will last really for about another week or so. For Cancer, Cancer has the Lord of the second in the first house and Jupiter in the 12th, which is usually good for consolidating money, holding on to money, spending money for good purposes or purposes which are useful to you. And Mars are in the second house, there'll be some argument about who is calling the shots, some arguments with the kids or with children in general, and some arguments with subordinates and bosses. So this is July 15th to August 15th, Cancer should be careful with that. The other rest of the chart, Saturn's in the ninth house, good for game, but bosses will be difficult to please and will change their minds a lot. And career-wise, it looks fairly good. But again, some conflicts or some obstructions, some follow-ups or work. Be careful if you're involved in any field that it involves moving parts or things like that. um, or any kind of production work. Moon and Venus are in the 11th house, good for financial gain. For Leo, Leo has Sun and Mercury in the 12th house, so there will be some loss of income for Leo this month. Some setbacks connected with finances. But Mars is still in the first house, one with K2. This creates a special kind of Roger for this chart. So even when things seem to be going bad for the sign, it sort of flips and turns itself over. It turns itself around. Rahu's in the 7th house. Partner enemies or opponents will be extraordinarily difficult to please, extraordinarily difficult to placate, and even relationship partners will be a little bit difficult to deal with. Saturn's in the 8th house. You'll have that continued resistance from hidden enemies up until about 2027. And Venus are in the 10th house. That's good for career life, although there'll be some delays or some pauses. And Jupiter in the 11th house, very good for financial gains in general for Leo, but there'll be a lot of expenses connected with that as well. So luck, friends are positive, but again, there'll be these, lack of a better term, conspiracies, uh, um, just any way to drag you down kinds of activities. For Virgo, so that's August 15th to September 15th. For Virgo, um, Renata Lagna in the first house indicates be careful with the company you keep, but it's not really a bad indicator. Sri Lagna in the second house is good for financial gains. K2 and Mars, some indication that your desires and um, your long-term ambitions will cause you some problems, but you will be able to overcome them. So the third Lord and the eighth Lord are placed in the 12th house. I'm sorry, second Lord and eighth Lord are placed in the 12th house. No, it is the third Lord and the eighth Lord, my apologies, are placed in the 12th house. So that's a good combination for overcoming financial difficulties with perseverance. Yogi point is in the 4th house, so there can be some financial gain connected with home life. Venus is the second house lord, is placed in Taurus in the 9th house, so this should actually be a good money week for this particular sign. Let's see now. Rahu's in the 6th house, so some difficulty with work or with employers. And Saturn's in the 7th house, some difficulty with business partnerships. But overall, financial life looks pretty good because of the Moon and Venus in the 9th house, Jupiter in the 10th house, and Sun and Mercury in the 11th house. So that looks fairly good for financial growth. Again, there will be expenditures, especially connected with the home. Okay, so that's what Mars indicates, and also maybe with vehicles. For Libra, Libra has this would be October 15th to November 15th. Libra has Sri Lagna in the first house, which is very good for financial success. The Lord of the first house is in the 8th, so financial success will come from hidden sources. Saturn's in the 6th. This isn't necessarily a bad combination, but it makes getting what you want a little bit tougher for this particular rising sign. So there'll be some obstacles or some hesitation. And Rahu's in the 5th. It'll make you doubt your desires or feel like maybe you're going a little bit too far in fulfilling your desires. And Mars and K2 in this particular sign that is is helpful for securing money, but it does make this sign hesitant to take risks because of fear of theft. Jupiter's in the ninth house. Sun and Mercury are in the 10th house of career. So this sign should become relatively popular during this month. For Scorpio, that's November 15th through December 15th. Yogi point is in the first house, good for financial gains. Venus and Moon aspect at Yogi point. This is overall a good combination for financial success. And the only drawback in this particular chart is that, oh, and by the way, Libra, again, I'm going to repeat it, don't trust your friends. It'll be very easy to get into fights with your friends over the next few weeks. Um, Let me just see now. Like getting back to Scorpio, my apologies for that digression. I just noticed something that was important that I missed. Rahu's in the fifth house, fourth house for this chart. So some disruption caused because of home expenses. K2 is with Mars in the 10th house. Good for career growth, actually, unexpected responsibilities, unexpected career duties. There will be some lack of acknowledgement that you actually contributed as much as you have. But basically, it's good for promotional opportunities. Saturn is in the fifth house, some difficulty with children or with uh, politics. Moon and Venus are in the seventh house. Good combination for romantic involvements. Jupiter is in the eighth house. This is not a bad Jupiter. It indicates unexpected gains through investments. And Sun and Mercury are in the ninth house. Difficult to please boss, but basically, boss will be expecting a lot out of you this particular month. For Sagittarius, Sagittarius has Jupiter in the seventh house. This is December 15th to January 15th. And this particular sign placement is good because it aspects the house of gains and also aspects the first house and the chart. So it will make it fairly easy for this sign to get what it wants done. So this is the US's chart. Saturn is in the fourth house, and Rahu's in the third house. So again, we do have some indications of domestic depression and domestic dissatisfaction showing up in the chart. Jupiter's Moon and Venus are in the sixth house. This isn't bad. Venus doesn't like the sixth house, in all honesty, but Moon with Venus tends to make it easy to overcome enemies or obstacles. Sun and Mercury in the eighth house. Some drawbacks, especially connected with government and some financial problems with government. And K2 Mars in the ninth house. Again, difficult to please bosses, but or else disruptive bosses. But that will only last for what it will only be quite as bad as it's been over the past couple of months for another couple of weeks. For Capricorn, Capricorn has Rahu in the second house, so it indicates so this is December 15th to January 15th. I'm sorry, January 15th to February 15th. And Rahu's in the second house. This is good for it makes the sign a little bit more greedy. Saturn is in, and again, some potential for disruption at the home or even outright rebellion. Saturn is in the third house. A lot of determination for this sign. Moon and Venus are in the fifth house. So overall, good relations with children. Jupiter's in sixth house. Not a bad combination. It's the Lord of the fourth house of home and the first house. So you'll be in agreement with your relationship partner or your business partner about what your goals and priorities are. Sun and Mercury are in the eighth house. Again, some difficulty with government, maybe even some financial difficulty connected with government. K2 and Mars are in the ninth house. This is again a kind of a Raj Yoga in the chart. So good luck to children and good luck to employees. For Aquarius, Aquarius is the 15th of February to the 15th of March. And Rahu's in Aquarius is pretty much considered to be in its own sign here. K2 is considered to be in its birthplace in this particular chart. But again, not a good time for starting new relationship or business partnerships for this sign. And there will be some dissatisfaction or anxiety about wanting to move on and try new things. Saturn is in the second house. Again, kind of a drag on income for this chart. But overall, this isn't a bad, this isn't a horrible chart because Jupiter goes to the fifth house and it will give financial gains through past efforts. Moon and Venus are in the fourth house, relatively good for domestic bliss or domestic happiness. Sun and Mercury are in the sixth house. So again, some opposition or some difficulty with government. Let's see now. Sign, I would say no new relationships for this particular sign, nor for Capricorn. Just because Mars K2 conjunction, as a matter of fact, besides I encourage from not getting into new relationships would tend to be sort of Leo, Virgo, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and also Taurus as well. So again, current relationships look okay, but new relationships look like a bad idea. And for this particular sign, let me just see now. Good for luck. This sign is relatively lucky this month. And good for financial gains, especially at work. For Pisces, last but not least, Saturn's in the first house. So it puts a lot of pressure on this sign to feel a little bit restricted. Moon and Venus are in the third house. That's okay. It'll make the sign very diplomatic, although it probably should stand up for itself a little bit more. Jupiter's in the fourth house. Overall, not a bad combination for success at work and in personal life. A lot of expenses, though, because of Rahu being in the 12th house. So you'll have to be careful about curbing your spending or taking responsibility for your spending. Mars and K2, Sun and Mercury. Okay, we already spoken about that. I believe Sun and Mercury are on the fifth house. Good for financial gains through government, good for financial improvement. Mars and K2 are in the sixth house. And that makes the sign more aggressive, more combative, more willing to take on new foes more frequently. So that's about it for the individual birth charts for the month. Let's look at where I expect to see some action. So we have a moon line and a Mercury line running through, running close to Hawaii and Alaska. I don't think they're going to do very much of anything. There may be some really bad rainfall in Alaska or in Hawaii, Um, Mercury is in Cancer sign. That's usually not an indication of eruption of fires. Um, Mars is hovering near the west coast along with Rahu, and there's also a Saturn line. So I think we can expect to see more fires and more gun-related accidents happening in both, um, not gun-related, but physical injury-related accidents happening in both nightclub schools and also police stations. Not because it's right, but because Mars is essentially the sign that rules police, and we have a Saturn line going through there. So this could reflect the previous week where we had that Saturn line going right through Los Angeles, or really close to us. But I think that energy hasn't shifted just yet. I think we're still in a period where it's wise to be careful. There's a Jupiter line going over um, Montana all the way down through New Mexico and Mexico itself. So I think you'll see a lot more nationalism in Alberta. That's that what I told you about before, that um, anxiety to be away from the central government in Canada is increasing, and this is pretty much really close to Alberta, Canada. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some kind of massive um, plebiscite to detach from Canada. Whether or not it'll be accepted is another story, but I wouldn't be very surprised with that. Sun line is moving through Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, down into Louisiana, and down into Mexico and Guatemala. What does that mean? Well, the sun line moving down through these particular uh, planets is not a set course. Um, Sun line running through this particular part of the country does bring intense heat there. Uh, I have seen forecasts for that over the past few days or so, and also intense scrutiny from the federal government, especially in these parts of the country, and all the way up into um, North Lakes region. I'm sorry, the Great Lakes region of Canada. We have a Mercury line running through Boston, all the way down to Venezuela and Peru and Chile. And this Mercury line will increase communications in that part of the world. We'll see a lot more um, communications connected with Dominican Republic, Haiti, and also Cuba as well. There's a moon line running through um, Bolivia and up through Brazil. That does indicate to me some changes in government, especially in Chile, Peru, and all the way over into Norway, Sweden, maybe even hitting to the northern part of the UK and Ireland. We have a Jupiter line running Western Africa up through France, up through Germany. all the way into close to the Ukraine. So there may be some hope for some diplomacy in that part of the world. Spain has been really going through a lot lately. Spain and France have really been going through a lot lately. Spain in terms of its economy, I believe. Um, and France uh, has not quite settled down. It's um, I don't want to give the impression that France is in utter chaos or that Europe's in utter chaos. Uh, that's not quite the idea, but there have been major social shifts in those countries over the past 30 years, and they haven't quite figured out how to handle them. And I think one of the problems you run into is this has led to a lot of anti-immigration backlash in those. So they're not financially equipped to handle them all as well. So they're trying to figure out how to um, nice, be unlike the way they were years ago, but still maintain control of their country. So I think that's really going to be a big conflict over. Still, it's going to be a big conflict over the next few years. Um, so it looks more like domestic conflict more so than let's say wars or things like that. There is a sun line running up through uh, Italy, Turkey, uh, Syria, close to Algeria, and finally up to close to Ukraine or in Ukraine. So that indicates Ukraine may get some leadership. And let's see now, there's a Mercury line running up through Ukraine into Russia. So we'll be hearing a lot about that part of the world again, and also a lot about Turkey and Egypt and maybe Central African Republic. That's what that looks like. So, so let me just retract just a little bit because I lost my space there. So we're going to be hearing a lot of communication coming out of Turkey. Also, maybe some flooding in Eastern Europe and Turkey though as well, and maybe even in Egypt and Sudan, all the way down the east coast of Africa. We have a Venus line running through Saudi Arabia and running up through Russia, so that tends to favor Russia in the war. I know people don't like it when I say that, but Venus lines generally do tend to favor the countries that they're transiting over. And let's see now. So maybe some problems in there's a Rahu line right next to Venus. Maybe some political or sexual scandals in Madagascar, and maybe even in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates too, as well. A potential disruption of government in Iran, and so it doesn't look like there'll be a revolution in Iran, at least not over the next couple of months. Maybe we'll start to see something happen in about over to Pakistan. So we can see more outbreak of fighting in Iran and even into Russia. But we also see a Saturn line coming through um, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and also affecting India. So there may be a border conflict in India over the next couple of weeks. And finally, we have Sun coming close to Ladakh and Bangladesh and not hitting any countries at all. Just Mercury, well, we'll be hearing a lot more communications about commerce from China and Vietnam over the next few weeks. And finally, yeah, so at least the Chinese, as we get over to trade negotiations with Vietnam and Indonesia starting to bear some fruit. We have this line. So there will be a change in trade relations with China, Philippines, Australia, and let's see now, we have Venus line going through uh, Indonesia and part of Guyana. Uh, I'm sorry, New Guinea. No, New Guinea is over here. That's Borneo, sorry, that's New Guinea. And over here, there'll be increased financial prosperity for Australia. And it still looks like New Zealand is stuck in a kind of a political scandal, which looks like it'll progress to the courts now. But Australia looks to be actually the far east coast of Australia looks to be in kind of a tight spot inflation-wise. I haven't followed Australia. Same is true of Japan. I haven't followed Australia that closely, but that's at least in the eastern part of the country, that seems to be the case. So for those of you who I faded out on you, I apologize, but um, it looks generally favorable. The planetary placements themselves aren't that great, and we will have some retrogrades and some backtracking this few weeks. But I think you'll also see a relative return to normalcy, especially Saturn going retrograde, and some toning down um, of the current administration's um, efforts, not because, mainly because of real, real political considerations that are being made as opposed to dogmatic political considerations that are being made. So I think you'll see in the second term, um, in this term, the Trump administration will actually, even though it'll keep its core mission intact, will become more pragmatic and flexible, especially over the summer months. Okay, so that's it for me for now. I want to thank all of you for getting this far, and even for those of you who dropped out earlier on. This has been longer than I wanted it to be. I had interruptions. I apologize for that. I did lose a cat this week, unfortunately. He's been with us for quite a few years. They're all getting older, and but this was kind of a shock. This was like a one night turn around. The cat just took a turn for the worse. Um, and that's what happens sometimes. So Thursday was consumed with that, with dealing with that issue. And so for any of you who have pets out there, I sincerely hope or hope you and all of your pets are happy and healthy and content. And I wish you the best of luck in the upcoming times. And I love you all. And I thank you so, so much for watching. Uh, Maybe this week we can put us over the top with 1,000 viewers. But again, um, that's becoming, it's important, but I really don't, I really had no anticipation that this channel would become a commercial powerhouse. It's more detailed. I don't market myself that way. I I don't market myself as being like a really um, catastrophic astrologer. I give you pretty much the chart as I see it, and I can make mistakes from time to time, but I tend not to be. I tend not to over. I tend not to. I try not to exaggerate what I see are essentially relatively stable conditions in the chart. Now, some of you may feel differently, and you may feel this has been a very unstable period. I don't. I think it's given the impression of instability, but it's not. It's not inherently unstable. All right, so that's just my opinion. You're welcome to disagree. You can do so in the comments. I love you all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll end this very long exit with a goodbye and a namaste. God bless everyone.